mankind itself is being hunted. After Vash's defeat and imprisonment at the hands of millions knives, his brother and angelic enemy of humanity is finally moving to massacre the planet's human population to prevent the exploitation of their kind, before the overuse of his own power kills him. Silent Run is the 8th volume of Trigun Maximum and details the darkest part of the entire series. The harsh setting of the series is having its life support stolen away. The plants might be effectively slaves, but the energy they create and the ways they can improve the world are the only thing that humanity can rely on after their fleet crash-landed onto this wasteland over a century ago, which was masterminded by Knives in an attempt to free his kind and protect them from the human race, which is something mentioned in Volume 8. Vash points out during their philosophical discussion that Knives' actions actually created the problem he is trying to solve. Despite his intentions, Knives is responsible for the plant's suffering as much as any other person on the planet, which is made worse as Knives is starting to suffer from other problems relating to his constant absorption of other plants. Absorbing so many of them into his body has caused some very troubling issues and behaviours in a character who's already in the middle of butchering a global population. Which really helps fix the problem I had with Knives in Volume 7. Knives' speeches are unique now, instead of just more generic villain talk. He's back to being his own character with his own problems to confront and contain. Trigun Maximum has always had this bleaker, darker undercurrent, and Volume 8 greatly emphasizes that feeling. The somber tone of this volume is helped by the misery of basically the entire cast, including the main characters, which is really helped by the art. Sure, all the typical Night Owl problems are here. Poorly established locations, confusing action, odd-looking faces in smaller panels, unclear events, word balloons not making it immediately clear who's talking, and so on and so on. But the inking feels much heavier and darker in this volume, designed to create an oppressive atmosphere and a sense of hopelessness. Vash and Wolfwood are drawn as if they are incredibly worn down and broken, especially with Vash's eyes that highlight just how sad a character he is underneath all of his idealism, with Knives' own stare changing to reflect his evolving mood. And despite his issues with visual storytelling, Night Owl comes up with at least one really impressive visual to demonstrate Knives' ominous power, while also giving Vash and Knives at least one telling brotherly moment that works very well. And when I said everyone was miserable, I meant it. Civilians are dying. Vash is being restrained by Legato Blue Summers and can't do anything besides struggle helplessly against his own body. Knives is starting to crack as a result of absorbing the other plants into his own body and into his identity as well, as he can still sense them in his mind, which is causing his convictions to fluctuate as he tries to process their conflicting thoughts and feelings alongside his own, and just how different his own people's opinion on their slavery is to his own. Legato is just as exhausted as Vash is, because he's had to keep him restrained all this time. Wolfwood is trapped on Knives' airship under the threat of death, surrounded by killers he has both betrayed and served. His attempt to use Vash to defeat Knives failed. Now he's forced to stand by and watch as Knives butchers the world, while also having to open fire on terrified people resisting Knives to save himself from their attacks. Civilization is collapsing under the pressure. Children are starving in the street. There is talk of cannibalism. The law is failing under the assault of Knives, and with the loss of the plants, the resources necessary for humans to live on this planet are turning to dust. The world is much darker, and the story will not be the same again for the rest of the series. But then there is a flash of hope, and it is glorious. It is where Night Owl's ability to be confusing actually works very well, because the scene is meant to be chaotic and fast, and that's what it succeeds in. And despite being a very short volume, padded out with an enjoyable Wolfwood side story that is still very melancholy right to the ending, Nightowl manages to get a lot done with the plot and the characters in this giant turning point for the series, and highlight how the mood suddenly changes once the certain key event happens. And speaking of the character stuff, despite being a method for expositing information to the audience, the second half of Wolfwood's confession of who he is and what he wants and all the secrets he's been hiding is great. The first part contains probably my single favourite image of the series so far. Vash's view on humanity shines through, and Wolfwood finally decides what he is. It's safe to say at this point, he's not really a priest. Or if he is, he's a very bad one. And that happens when he just pours his heart out. It really plays up the obvious visual of how the plants look like angels to fantastic effect. It solidifies Vash's relationship with Wolfwood, and it's just a really good arc for understanding these characters on a fundamental level. Legato is still terrifyingly powerful, and the series hints towards there being something very strange surrounding him. Besides the obvious rarity of a series having a quadriplegic villain trapped inside a coffin, armed with a fanatical loyalty to his master, and unbelievable and, so far, unexplained psychic powers. Knives is also in a very interesting place as a character, and some familiar faces return for their shining moments. It's been quite obvious for a while now, and it's very obvious in this volume. Despite everything, Knives does love his brother, and on some level, fighting with him on the issue of humanity causes him a great deal of pain. It isn't perfect, however. The character of Levo is becoming a major part of Wolfwood's story, having been indoctrinated into following their master's orders without question. The problem is that we barely know anything about him. He is presumably the Double Fang, one of the final Gung-Ho Gun members, because he fights with two cross-shaped submachine guns instead of Wolfwood's full-scale crucifix-shaped Gatling gun and rocket launcher. But besides apparently crying a lot when he was younger, we know nothing about Levo as a character. It's hard to care about this relationship, especially compared to the 7 volumes we've had to flesh out Wolfwood's relationship with Vash. Their master, who is unnamed and is wheelchair-bound, but still cuts up quite a fight, isn't that complicated either. However, he works as a villain because he comes across as very unpleasant towards our heroes and the suffering of others, which gets under Wolfwood's skin. Elendira doesn't get much to do, and that's a shame. While her personality makes sense with her actions, it's a disappointment because it overlooks her stylish manner and bizarre suitcase weapon. She's very inactive compared to all of the other villains in this volume, which is shocking because Legato Blue Summers is incapable of moving at all, and yet he's still more active than she is. There are also minor bits of backstory given to the brothers, and I'm not sure if it makes any sense. Granted, they are over 100 years old, so there's time for this event to happen, but I don't know exactly when that little story would fit, or if it even can, fit into the timeline of the series. Also, I still have no idea who this Ludia woman is, or why she is important enough to get a flashback to Knives and Vash's past together. Besides that, there are 1 or 2 moments that are seemingly skipped over during the aftermath of after the big change happens, seemingly for the sake of moving the story along at a much faster pace. While I appreciate that this volume is a solid chapter within a wider narrative by itself, a few more pages could have been devoted to adding those details and fixing those gaps, especially as the volume is padded out by a side story that I assume takes place somewhere inside the 2-year time skip. And it's a nice little story with a really boring villain about the frustration of living a secure life without any freedom, contrasted with the agony of having to forge your own destiny with nothing but your own strength. And it has some very nice visual storytelling. It shows just how far Wolfwood has come over the entire series, and what he wanted in the past, and how he feels now that he has it, but it's 30 pages long. And that space could have been used to add to the main story and explain why certain objects get repaired and establish a time frame for certain things, or explain why certain characters don't do certain things when that would be their logical motivation in the moment. Trigun Maximum's 8th volume is flawed. There are some plot holes and moments that are glossed over, and the art sometimes exchanges darkness of tone for clarity. But it absolutely succeeds in its goal of being the darkest part of the story so far without feeling needlessly morose or cruel. There are still some fantastic visuals breaking past all of Nightow's failings as an artist, and his strengths as a writer shine through once again. Silent Run is a quick read, and while it might not be the best volume in the entire series by any means, the arc succeeds in what it was aiming to accomplish and defines the entire series going forward, with a darker tone that is punctuated by hope. Thank you for watching. Good night.